Joining us on the broadcast is a very, very interesting voice, and I've been looking forward to this conversation. This is Ameya Pratap Singh. Now, Ameya Pratap Singh is writing a book, which I'm told is available for pre-order as we speak and will be out for delivery during the first week of February. The book is called Ram, A Global History. It's part of a special series of history made convenient for a modern audience in terms of reading. It's available in a hardcover as we speak. I'm sure you can buy it on Amazon and other booksellers. Ameya himself he studied at the LSE, he's been to Cambridge, he's been to Oxford, and has now chosen to write this book. Ameya, let me tell you about the themology that we're doing. Now, we've been trying to do a news channel telecast on, reporting from Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia. How crucial was something like this in a conversation in the media to happen on these cross-cultural links?
I think the effort is highly commendable because the Ramayana in particular is a text that, of course, originated in India and is very special to Hindus and Indians of all stripes, but equally it is special for the larger cultural history of Asia. And the three countries that you mentioned, Thailand, Cambodia and Indonesia, have very, very rich traditions of not just textual interpretations, adaptations of the Ramayana, but equally also celebrations, for instance, shadow puppetry, dance forms, various other iterations. Not a lot of people perhaps know that even the current monarch of Thailand is still referred to as Ram the Ninth.
Yeah.
So there are very rich traditions in these countries, and I think it's highly commendable that a news channel is taking the effort to bring to light these varied cultural histories and interconnections.
Yeah. So we can pat each other on the back. It's highly commendable that you're writing this book, Ram, A Global History. I mean, tell us a bit about this book. What have you discovered through the journey of writing it?
Yeah, in the book, the primary question that we were interested in was why did a text that originated in India, was primarily grounded in Hindu ethics, why did this text transmit to such a large part of the globe? So the book covers 11 countries, including the three that were mentioned. But in addition, it covers Philippines, Japan, China, Tibet, even diasporic communities in Trinidad and Tobago. And the primary findings of the book are that the ethics and moral lessons that the Ramayana imparted had a truly universal resonance. And therefore, in the transmission of the Ramayana to Southeast Asia, the text and the story of Lord Ram exceeds even the boundaries of religion and geography and truly becomes a universal epic, where whether it is the role of an ideal ruler, whether it is the role of an ideal family, an ideal son, an ideal daughter, all these types of moral lessons effectively could be gleaned from the treatise that is the Ramayana. And therefore, it became, in its transmission to other parts of Asia and other parts of the world, a truly global text. That was the key finding.
All right. So obviously it's an exercise, and it begins with a personal exercise in curiosity, and then you do your research, and then speak to people, and then of course present it to an audience in the form of this book. What was that point or that anecdote or the story or the revelation or the point of information which you found interesting or astonishing through the process?
One very interesting aspect that came out in the empirical study was how these unique adaptations emerged. So for instance, in a large part of Southeast Asia, the Buddhist tradition is very strong, where Lord Ram is seen as a bodhisattva or a previous incarnation of Buddha. And accordingly, the moral lessons that his image and characters used to impart are linked to Buddhist ethics as much as they are linked to Hindu ethics. In other parts of Asia, for instance, in the Philippines, the prevalence of monkeys as part of general life was less in that particular village. And therefore, Lord Ram's army is constituted of water buffaloes and crocodiles. And there are these types of unique adaptations in all the 11 countries, including, I would say, for instance, I covered in the book the cultural history of indentured laborers that were taken after the abolition of slavery, were taken from India to Trinidad and Tobago to work as plantation workers. And the Ramcharitamanas was the text from India that gave these indentured laborers hope.
Correct.
And the image of Lord Ram gave them hope, because just as Lord Ram was able to return to Ayodhya, these indentured laborers hoped that one day they would be able to return to their motherland. So there are all these interesting connections. There are probably more than I can remember in this moment. But yeah, Lord Ram's image has been used in various ways to inspire hope and to create a moral foundation for society.
I was just interviewing Ambassador Baswini Mukherjee recently, and her latest book is on the indentured laborers, and you mentioned Trinidad and Tobago, and yeah, so that story is very well relatable. But in the interpretations of the Ramayana which you mentioned, okay, we've discussed the Ramaken and the Ramakare, okay, what's been your learning?
In South Asia, the story is slightly more intriguing, because India's sphere of influence and power is felt more closely in these parts. So there are two Ramayans in particular, three, I guess I could speak of three. The one in Myanmar, the one in Nepal, and the one in Sri Lanka. Now, the Sri Lankan one, although the historical evidence for Sri Lanka being the Lanka that is mentioned in the Ramayana is patchy, but there is this big belief now in the Sri Lankan tradition that that Ravan, there's a more sympathetic treatment of Ravan in the Sri Lankan tradition, and the Ramayan's particular interpretation is called the Janaki Haran. And so, for instance, Ravan's abduction of Sita is not seen as an act of hubris. It's justified as an act of revenge for the cutting of Ravan's sister's nose. So there are these sort of sympathetic interpretations. Ravan is shown in a positive light. In the Myanmar tradition, the Ramayana is more of a Buddhist orientation, as I described earlier. But interestingly, the royal family up to King Thibaw, until the British annexed Burma, or what was then called Burma, there was a very strong tradition of the Ramayana being performed as part of royal ceremonies. But as I said, it was more in the Buddhist variant. The Nepali Ramayana, Nepal has also a very strong Sanskrit tradition. But with the recent nationalist movement, the Ramayana that has become the most popular in Nepal is the Bhanubhakt Ramayana, because it was the first time a literator from Nepal interpreted the Ramayana in the Nepali language. So within South Asia, these are broadly, I would say, the three prominent sources. And depending on whether you want to include the Tibetan one, it was found in, the manuscript was found in a cave. And interestingly, despite Buddhism being such a prominent mode of transmission of the Ramayana, the Tibetan Ramayana is not Buddhist in its orientation.
Okay, all right. So, Amey, when we talk about the Ark of Indian Civilization, what are we just understanding purely from, even if it's purely from the study of just the Ramayana, its interpretation, the story of Ram?
I think in modern terms, the Honorable Prime Minister has referred to India's ambitions to become a Vishwaguru. And in the book, I've mentioned that just as India is, returning to the table of great powers, there is this now looking back at history and looking back at what you refer to as Indic civilization and looking back at the larger cultural ambit of India's influence. And the key lesson to take away is that if you look at globalization in the Western tradition, globalization is seen as an effort to instill homogeneity, cultural homogeneity. But if you look at the transmission of the Ramayana and you look at the Indian influence in other parts of Asia, the influence rose just as cultural heterogeneity was on its rise. So the fact that cultural influence did not require for everyone to be uniformly categorized into alike cultural categories, right? This was not necessary. Cultural influence could take place in an organic, sustainable manner, which actually brought to the fore the uniqueness of each cultural society. So this, I would say, is the key part of the influence of Indic civilization, which is unique in its story of globalization versus more modern adaptations.
All right. So where do we then revive the connection in terms of our understanding of the civilizational connect with the nations of South Asia, Southeast Asia, that is, millennia, maybe two, maybe even older?
It is extremely crucial because I think we are at a very unique moment in history, and the Ram Mandir represents in some ways this uniqueness of this moment. Is Asia is finally coming into her own. And of course, Asia is now modern, and it has also learned things from the West. But she has her own cultural history, and there are parts of that cultural history that are not recognized. So, for instance, the ASEAN countries in 1998, after they were reeling from economic recession, in order to bring cultural cohesiveness, actually came out with a program called Realizing Ram. And a cultural troupe of performers was professionally appointed. The troupe would go to various ASEAN countries and perform the dance performances on the basis of the Ramayana. And these are all parts of our culture and history that we should be very, very proud of, and do draw links, organic links to these countries, which should be part of our outreach.
All right. Ameya, we are short on time, but so how do we do the reconnection? People in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Cambodia, others, India, Sri Lanka, you mentioned Myanmar. How do we do the reconnect?
I think that the best way to reconnect, one, is to create awareness on both sides that these historical connections existed in the first place.
Yeah.
I think there are more prominent examples like Angkor Wat and other historical archaeological evidences of Hindu influence and vice versa, I guess. But I think the first step would be to create awareness. And the second step would be then to encourage as much as possible people-to-people dialogue and interaction. So people can truly understand and reflect upon the shared culture and heritage that underlies the ties that India has with these countries.
Okay, all right. The book itself and presciently timed. I'm told officially it's out on sale right now, so you can pre-order it on Amazon. It's called Ram: A Global History. Ameya Pratap Singh, thank you very much for joining us, and all the best with the publication of the book. I look forward to reading it. I've just ordered my copy while we've been talking.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon. For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.